Thank you for joining us for the beginning of our summer series of seminars through the BCA CBE. I'm pleased this morning, afternoon, whenever you're tuning in, to introduce our guest speaker, Reverend Koe Umezu. For those of you who may not know, she is the daughter of former Bishop Reverend Jodo Umezu and Janet Umezu. Reverend Kohe has been the part-time assistant minister and community outreach coordinator of the West LA Buddhist Temple since August of 2020. She received her first level ordination in July 2019 from the Jodo Shinshu Honganji Ha. Reverend Kohe is currently enrolled in the Institute of Buddhist Studies in the Masters of Arts in Buddhist Studies program. Since shelter in place, she stated that she has also discovered that she enjoys baking desserts to share with friends and relatives. Hopefully you will all listen carefully. She, like I said earlier, she has a lot to cover. She has helped BC quite a bit in our various LGBTQ seminars, and she's also taken part in an international group that has been working on Tanisho. So I thought it very appropriate that she has used the idea of Sesshu Fusha, graphs never to be abandoned, for her talk today. So thank you very much for joining us. Reverend Koya, yoroshiku onegaishimasu.
Arigatou gozaimasu, Sensei. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much to Reverend Hirano for inviting me to speak today. And thank you to Koichi and the CBE staff for all your hard work in putting this together today. Thank you also to everybody who is in attendance today. A little bit, just to add a little bit more about myself as it relates to today's presentation. I grew up in a Jodo Shinshu family, as Hirano Sensei alluded to, but I discovered Jodo Shinshu for myself when I was in my 20s. And that led me to become a minister's assistant at Venice Honganji under Reverend John Iwahara. And then when he moved to Gardena, then I followed him to Gardena. And while I assisted Reverend John Iwahara at Gardena Buddhist Church, we helped to establish a club dedicated to LGBTQ awareness and support in the Sangha called Ichimi. And so that has been going on, I think we're in our third year now, trying to keep it alive. But now, after I received my Tokudo ordination in 2019, Bishop Harada asked me to help at West Los Angeles Buddhist Temple under Koho Takata Sensei to help to do outreach to young adults. So that is where I am currently at. And the way that I just identify for myself is that I consider myself someone who follows Shinran Shonin's Jodo Shinshu teaching, who also happens to be part of the LGBTQ community. As many of you know, June is Pride Month. And so Hirano Sensei and CBE wanted to hold an educational event in observance of Pride. And so I was invited by Reverend Hirano today to do a presentation on what in Jodo Shinshu doctrine allows us to say that Jodo Shinshu supports and accepts the LGBTQ community. So today, I hope to be able to share with all of you my appreciation and understanding of Jodo Shinshu doctrine through passages of a text called Tanisho, which some of you may be familiar with. As I share with you today, I invite you to keep your mind open to new ideas about Jodo Shinshu that you may not have heard, and Buddhism in general. And I look forward to the Q&R response, or question and response and discussion session after the presentation. Hopefully, the presentation won't go too long. There will still be time for that afterwards. Lastly, as I move into the presentation portion, I would like to echo Venerable Shinran's sentiment from Article 2 of Tanisho and say that I can only share the teaching, the Nembutsu teaching that I feel that I have received and is true for me. With that, I'd like to say thank you very much again, everyone, for being here today. And I'd now like to move into the presentation portion of today's program. So let me just share my screen. All right. Everybody can see this?
Yes, Sensei.
Great, thank you. So just I wanted to quickly go over the outline of my presentation today. So in part one, I will be introducing the importance of doctrine, why I think doctrine is important, and quickly go over a summary of Venerable Shinran's life, followed by a definition of terms. In part two, I would like to read some passages from Tanisho. And Tanisho is a lot longer than what I'm presenting here today. I will just be presenting some choice passages. And then lastly, I will conclude with conclusory remarks on the passages that I presented. Okay, so part one, the introduction and the importance of doctrine. So I would like to address two questions, I guess. Why is understanding doctrinal support for supporting and accepting LGBTQ plus individuals and community important? And why do we need to establish ourselves on the foundation of the teaching of Venerable Shinran? So LGBTQ plus individuals and the community and society are a minority group and are often marginalized. Some subgroups of the LGBTQ plus community are more marginalized than others, and some regions more than others, local and global, marginalize LGBTQ plus communities and individuals more so than others. So many people who champion what we call in our daily language human rights want to support all people. And right now, I think that we can say that it is, you know, if I can say in fashion, it is a trend to want to outwardly support human rights. But what about after it is no longer in fashion? Because as we know, things are not permanent in this world. After it is no longer in fashion, will we still support this community? If we as individuals of a Jodo Shinshu community want to support a marginalized group of society, such as the LGBTQ plus community, and want to claim that it is because Jodo Shinshu supports these efforts, then I think we need to make sure that we do so in line with our teaching. As Jodo Shinshu devotees, we should also try to sincerely listen to and understand what Buddha and Venerable Shinran are trying to teach us. Are their teachings truly in line with these movements, or are we just hearing what we want to hear? As each of us support this community as individuals, we might do so because we feel that it's just the right thing to do and that we feel that everyone is equal. As an individual at an everyday level, I think that this is great and this is fine. But if we go outside and say, we need to support the LGBTQ plus community because Jodo Shinshu says that everyone is equal, then is that really true? What allows us to make this claim? Or again, are we just hearing what we want to hear? I'm going to make the assumption that all of us here today are listeners of the teaching of Namo Amida Buddha. We are all at different levels of interest and learning. And some of us now might be thinking, does Jodo Shinshu actually have a doctrine that we need to follow? I thought that we can interpret Namo Amida Buddha as we wish. Or maybe some of you might be concerned that saying that we have to follow a doctrine feels dogmatic. So I would first like to clarify that in the practice of Jodo Shinshu, which is to be together with the universal 18th vow of Namo Amida Buddha, there is no necessity to memorize sutras or commentaries or any texts. There is no requirement to outwardly behave in a specific way, such as following precepts. Neither I nor any minister or Dharma teacher in our tradition can tell you how to live your life. However, I think it is important that we know that the practice of a Jodo Shinshu devotee, as clarified by Venerable Shinran, is to be together with Namo Amida Buddha's 18th vow. that is all that is necessary. So when I use the word doctrine today, I am referring to the teaching and practice that was clarified by Venerable Master Shinran, in which we should align ourselves with if we consider ourselves devotees of this teaching. So next, I would like to quickly comment on what a tradition or stream of Buddhism is. Shakyamuni Buddha set out clear guidelines and rules for people who wish to become unbound from the roots of their stress and suffering, that is, to attain nirvana, as I'm sure you've heard this term. And after his passing into parinirvana, after Shakyamuni Buddha shed his body, these teachings and rules and guidelines were all later recorded by followers in various sutras. Subsequently, over the centuries, different streams of Buddhism have formed based on certain sutras or groups of sutras or teachings. The various bodhisattvas, sages, and great Buddhist masters and teachers over the centuries understood that there were certain sutras that suited or were appropriate for different certain types of people. People that choose to or are moved to follow one stream over another do so because they feel that the teaching and practice of that sutra is appropriate for them. From this perspective, I think that we all need to recognize that we are all choosing to be here, following this stream of Buddhism that we call Jodo Shinshu, because for one reason or another, we feel it is appropriate teaching and practice for ourselves. And I think it is important for us to always be reminded that this stream of Buddhism is based on Venerable Shinran's clarification of the Pure Land Sutras and commentaries by Buddhist masters. So when I present doctrine today, I do not mean to do so in any type of dogmatic sense, but as a reminder that if we are here today as Jodo Shinshu devotees, we should recognize that it is Venerable Shinran who clarified the teaching, practice, and attainment of Namo Amida Buddha that we call Jodo Shinshu. And so we should do our best to continue to align ourselves with this fundamental teaching. As devotees who wish to learn more about the stream or gain a better understanding for ourselves, we might listen to or read other people's understanding of Shinran's teaching to learn about the different flavors, what we call flavors of Jodo Shinshu understanding. Or we might read other Buddhist teachers' writings, but we should do our best ultimately to rely on Shinran's words and Buddha's words of the Pure Land Sutras. Remember that there are many other streams of Buddhism to choose from. So to ultimately rely on another Buddhist teacher's words or other sutras could be said to rely on that stream's lineage and teaching and practice. I think that the same goes for the words of the Dharma teachers, even within our tradition. Most likely, all of us here are learning or have learned about Venerable Shinran's words through a Dharma teacher at our temple. If we were to only and ultimately rely on our immediate teacher's word, then it would be the teaching of our immediate teacher and not Venerable Master Shinran's. So each of us should also be careful to not mistake our own flavor or our own appreciation of Venerable Shinran's teaching as Jodo Shinshu itself. This could lead us to go all willy-nilly with our own personal idea of Jodo Shinshu and lead us to follow only a caricature of Jodo Shinshu. That we all follow the same teaching and practice or the same Buddha Dharma, the universal 18th vow of Namo Amida Buddha, is what makes us a Jodo Shinshu Sangha. So taking all of this into consideration, I hope that we can all understand that it is important that we do our best to keep ourselves centered on the fundamentals of this stream of Buddhism that we are following, Jodo Shinshu, as we move forward, not just in the context of today's presentation, but also as we engage in our lives and society. So with that, I would like to move on to an introduction quickly of Venerable Shinran's life. So as I mentioned, Jodo Shinshu is the clarification of the true essence of the Pure Land teaching and practice, which was clarified by Shinran Shonin, or Venerable Master Shinran. Tanisho is a text of the words of the founder of this tradition, so I think it is important that we have an idea about who this person is. Due to our limited time together today, I cannot go into detail about Venerable Shinran's life, but I would like to quickly summarize a bit, if you will, the truncated Cliff Notes version about the life of the person who who clarified this Pure Land Gate, and whose words we are studying and reflecting on today. Of course, I encourage each of you to further study the full life of Venerable Master Shinran with your local ministers. So Venerable Shinran lived in this world from 1173 to 1263 CE in Japan. During the time and place that Venerable Shinran lived, people were experiencing famine, pandemic, and natural disasters, causing many people to lose their lives at what we would now consider early ages. At the age of 9, Venerable Shinran was dropped off to a Buddhist monastery at Mount Hiei in Kyoto. And while on Mount Hiei, Venerable Shinran engaged in various Pure Land practices in hopes of settling his birth in the Pure Land to become Buddha. But after 20 years of serious cultivation and practice, he felt more doubt than he did assurance. So after 20 years of this practice, he left Mount Hiei in search of answers and was led to Master Genku, who we also know as Master Honen, who introduced him to the exclusive Nembutsu practice, which is to have confidence in and rely solely on Namo Amida Buddha's 18th vow while reciting Nembutsu, Namo Amida Buddha. So at the time, Master Genku's teaching of exclusive Nembutsu practice was very radical because, for one thing, it challenged the status quo practice of Buddhism. And secondly, it was made available to people of all walks of life, all strata of society. As a result, it was considered a threat to the government of the Buddhist order at the time. So because those that were in power felt threatened, Master Genku and his followers were exiled from the capital city of Kyoto, and some were even executed. Fortunately, Venerable Shinran was among those who were only exiled from Kyoto. Unfortunately, Shinran and Master Genku were exiled to different areas of Japan, and that was the last time he was able to see his friend and teacher. In his exile, Venerable Shinran committed himself to sharing the Nembutsu teaching with the villagers that he encountered. He had also gotten married and had children, and after 3 years, his exile was commuted, but he chose not to return to Kyoto right away, and he continued to share the teaching with those that he continued to encounter. He also, during this time, he also committed himself to writing his main textual work, the Kyogyo Shomonrui. During this teaching career, there was an incident in which his son was going around telling others that Venerable Shinran was giving him secret teachings and that there was more to Jodo Shinshu than what Venerable Master Shinran was letting on. To prove to others that his son was spreading lies, he disowned his son. He did eventually return to Kyoto and continued his writing career, keeping in touch with his followers and via letters before he passed into the Pure Land. I think it is important for us to understand what type of life Venerable Shinran had when we read his writings and his sayings. We should remember that although he was very well educated in Buddhist texts and practices, he was also a person who did not set out to create a new Dharma lineage, as he felt he was only passing on what he had received from his teacher. However, what he wrote and shared was so impactful and resonated deeply with so many people that a new movement of Buddhism developed out of his teaching. A narrative that I often hear favored today is that Venerable Shinran was just an ordinary guy. And although we could consider him just an ordinary guy, I think it is important that we also do not discount his deep, profound understanding of and devotion to the Buddha Dharma. The words that he wrote and spoke were not just words of an ordinary guy, but someone who was devoted to understanding and experiencing the Buddha Dharma for himself, someone who had a profound understanding of what it means to be. And he was able to open the gate for others to do so as well. This is why we refer to him as the Shonin, or the Venerable One. So now, thank you very much for listening to my introduction on Shinran. I would now like to move on to defining terms. So before I actually get into the actual passages of Tanisho, I would like to present some Buddhist terms that we all use, but I think we rarely discuss the meanings of together. When we use terms, we are all outwardly using the same terms, but we might often have different definitions in our heads about what these words mean, which can lead to disagreements and misunderstandings. Language can be a very difficult thing and very limiting, yet it is our main way of communicating with each other, and so we have to do our best to get on the same page in order to share ideas. So Venerable Master Shinran, in his technical writings, defined many terms, and I would like to share some of these with you today so that we can do our best to be on the same page. So I would like to share my understanding of the definition of Buddhism, the term Buddha, Buddha's land, and Jodo Shinshu. Some of you might not agree with the definitions that I will be presenting here today. As I understand, we all, have done our own, a lot of us have done our own studies and maybe come to different conclusions. However, what I am presenting here today, I am sharing with what I understand Venerable Shinran to have shared in his writings. And this is how I have received his teaching. So if you happen to not agree with me, for today's presentation, please try to roll with me with these definitions. I've also given Koichi, the CBE staff, I'm not sure if they sent it out already, but a supplemental handout that, quote, shows my work as to how I came to these conclusions of these definitions. And in the supplemental handout, I have provided quotes from various sutras and from Shinran Shonin's writing. So with that, I encourage you to study these terms in the context of Venerable Shinran's writings for yourself with your local minister, okay? So first off, Buddhism. Again, I don't have, due to time restrictions, I don't have time to go over that handout on how I came to these definitions, so I will just be presenting my conclusions on these definitions. So Buddhism, as I will be using it today, is the teaching and practice on how to completely unbind ourselves from the root causes of our stress and suffering. Okay, this is how I will be using, or please keep in mind that this is what I think Buddhism is as we talk about it today. Buddha. So there were two main aspects, I think, in Venerable Shinran's thought about what Buddha is. The first is that it is a manifestation of true reality, making itself known to beings who cannot see true reality otherwise. So Venerable Master Shinran's understanding of a true Buddha is that a Buddha is a being or an entity that is manifested out of unconditioned dharmic reality in order to teach and guide others to meet with this unconditioned dharmic reality as well, and leading them to become part of that activity. So Shakyamuni Buddha was a Buddha that Venerable Shinran considered a Tathagata that appeared in this world in order to share the teaching of Namo Amida Buddha, to share the teaching and existence of Namo Amida Buddha, actually. And Namo Amida Buddha is the compassionate manifestation of reality itself, appearing to universally rescue all beings from their root causes of stress and suffering. Namo Amida Buddha is teaching and practice. It is Buddha Dharma and true reality itself. On a side note, in our tradition, because our tradition originates from Japan, the Japanese pronunciation Namo Amida Butsu is what we recite, and we often call this Nembutsu. So Namo Amida Buddha is the same as Namo Amida Butsu, which is the same as Nembutsu. The second point is that I think Venerable Master Shinran aimed it is what he aimed to become after his human form for the sake of himself, as well as to benefit others. That is to become part of the universalness that works to guide others to unbind themselves from their roots and of their stress and suffering. Buddha's land. This we also call Pure Land, right? This is the realm of ultimate nirvana or parinirvana. And this Pure Land is the, if I can use the word place, where Venerable Master Shinran aspires to go to become Buddha himself. But simultaneously, it is the source from where the Dharma wisdom and compassion is coming from to reach him. And it is making itself known to us from Buddha's land. And now the term Jodo Shinshu. So one way that we can understand this term is that it is the official name of our stream of Buddhism, Jodo Shinshu Hongan Jiha. But we should also know that what it means, according to Venerable Master Shinran's writings, is that it is the true essence of the Pure Land. And Venerable Shinran explains that this is the 18th vow of the larger sutra on immeasurable life that was expounded by Shakyamuni Buddha. And the 18th vow reads, if when I attain Buddhahood, sentient beings in the lands of the 10 directions who sincerely and joyfully entrust themselves to me, desire to be born in the land and call my name even 10 times should not be born there, may I not attain perfect enlightenment. Excluded, however, are those who commit the 5 grave offenses and abuse the right Dharma. Further, the fulfillment passage of the 18th vow of the larger sutra on immeasurable life, expounded by Shakyamuni Buddha, states, all sentient beings who have heard the name rejoice and trust and think of Buddha even once. Through Buddha's sincere merit transference, aspiring to be born there, they immediately become assured of birth and dwell in the stage of non-retrogression. But excluded are those who have committed the 5 grave offenses and abused the right Dharma. So thus, Jodo Shinshu is none other than the teaching and practice of Dharma reality itself, Namo Amida Buddha, that is guiding and carrying us to parinirvana, Pure Land, ourselves, through Namo Amida Buddha's universal 18th vow, which I prefer the term fundamental vow, but I'm sure we've also mostly heard primal vow or original vow. And this is the teaching and practice that Venerable Shinran considered appropriate for himself and the people of his time. If you are not familiar with the 18th vow and its fulfillment passage, please, 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 please study this with your local minister. It is literally the crux of our tradition. So please keep these definitions in mind as we move forward through today's presentation. And I also invite you to keep in mind that Buddhism was not just, quote, a way to live for Venerable Master Shinran, but it was truly a way for him to become a Buddha, completely, permanently cutting off his conditioned stress and suffering for the benefit of himself and for the sake of others. So now I would like to invite us to listen to Shinran's words through passages from Tanisho. So first, what is Tanisho? And why did I choose this text? Why did I choose Tanisho? So Venerable Shinran, as you may know, left a lot of technical and academic writing. For the average lay follower of his time, he did write poems. He wrote 3 series of poems, poems on the Pure Land, poems on the Great Masters, and poems on the 3 Dharma eras. Although it is not in the form of his formal writings, we also have letters that he had written to his followers in response to their questions after he had gone back to Kyoto. So there are many different texts that we could choose to study and examine Venerable Shinran's thought and teaching. And there are many different angles we can take to address the topic of LGBTQ+, the acceptance of, there are many different angles that we can take to address the topic of accepting LGBTQ plus individuals and communities. And I encourage you to read and study with your local ministers regarding those different angles of approach after today. However, today I have chosen Tanisho because it is a text that purports to be Venerable Shinran's spoken word to his followers, but also because it is relatively short, and I think it encapsulates and summarizes many points of Venerable Master Shinran's thought and teaching, both which make it relatively, and I stress the word relatively, relative to his many other writings, easily accessible to those who wish to learn more about what Venerable Master Shinran taught on the universality of Namo Amida Buddha. That being said, I think it definitely helps when we are supplemented by Venerable Shinran's technical writing to help us understand the context of terms that he uses, which is why I presented the terms prior to this. So what is Tanisho? Tanisho is a text said to be written by one of Venerable Shinran's disciples named Yuyembo. It is said to contain the words that Venerable Master Shinran spoke to his followers, and Yuyembo recorded what he remembered in an effort to correct differences and misunderstandings in Venerable Master Shinran's teachings after he had passed into the Pure Land. On the title of Tanisho, Tan has the meaning of sigh or grief or sorrow. I has the meaning of different or strange, odd, changed. Sho has the meaning of excerpt, annotations, or notes. So I personally prefer not to translate the title of this text because it is the name of the text. Further, there is actually no agreed upon translation for this title. So I think it is easier and more helpful for us if we all just knew the text by one name, Tanisho. And if you are interested in learning about the various ways the title has been translated, I've also given the CB staff to share with you a handout on Tanisho translations, at which I've listed some of the various ways that this title has been translated into English. So regarding the content or the structure of Tanisho, the text that we recognize today includes an introduction. It includes 10 articles that share Venerable Shinran's spoken words to his followers. It includes a special preface to the second half of the book or text. And it includes 8 articles of Yuyembo's descriptions of the current wrong understandings of his time. And it includes an epilogue. There is also an appendix describing what happened to Master Honen, Venerable Shinran, and the other exclusive Nembutsu practice followers at the time of their exile. It also includes a colophon, which was written by Master Renyo, the 8th head of Honganji. And for context, the current head of our Honganji is the 25th head. So this was many, 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 many years ago. So obviously the colophon was added much later by Master Renyo, since Master Renyo lived centuries after Venerable Shinran. So the passages that I will be presenting today will be my own personal translations of the text. And so, but I have, as I mentioned, submitted a supplemental handout so that you can compare and contrast my translations with our Honganji translations, if you wish. So the main articles and points that I would like to cover today that I think express and underpin Venerable Shinran's understanding of the universality of Namo Amida Buddha's vow are, first, a passage from the epilogue, which describes Venerable Shinran's description of who we are. Second is a passage from Article 8, which describes Venerable Shinran's understanding of our relationship to Namo Amida Buddha. Third is a passage from Article 5, which is Venerable Shinran's understanding of his relationship to others. And lastly, I will present a passage from Article 1, the universalness of Namo Amida Buddha's vow. So with that, I would like to finally get into passages from Tanisho. And starting with the passage from the epilogue, Venerable Shinran's understanding of who we are. So the passage that I would like to share today reads, "There is nothing we know of good and bad. If we were to know good in the Tathagata's heart, we could say we know good. If we were to know bad as the Tathagata does, then we could say we know bad. However, we are ordinary people who are completely full of the three poisons. This world of transiency is a burning house. All things in it are false and nonsense and without truth. Only the Nembutsu is true." So when we read Tanisho and Venerable Shinran's works in general, I think it is important, very important to keep in mind the Buddhist context of words that are being used. So in the Buddhist context, the word good generally means wholesome acts leading to cutting off our three poisons or our roots of suffering. Bad means unwholesome acts leading to not cutting off these three poisons, or they are leading us away from liberation from our roots of suffering. It does not refer to any conventional societal morals or ethics, although some actions and practices may seemingly be in sync with those things. True means leading us to a deeper understanding and reliance of Dharma and true reality. So true means Dharma and true reality. And false is the opposite of true, which is, in other words, our three poisons. And so true and false in this context do not refer to conventional facts that we might use in everyday language, like, is this true, is this not true? It is referring to the Dharma and true reality and that which is not the Dharma and true reality. So I mentioned the three poisons. So the three poisons, as Venerable Master Shinran calls them, are the causes of our stress and suffering. You may have also heard them referred to as our passions or our cravings, right? And these three poisons, generally, I think in BCA, we have heard gas, right? Greed, anger, and stupidity. I prefer selfish likes and selfish dislikes and delusion of reality. So selfish likes is what we like based on our own conveniences, and selfish dislikes are what we dislike based on our own conveniences. And delusion of reality or confusion to reality refers to our lack of true understanding of true reality and Dharma. And true reality, or the true essence of all things and beings, can be understood in terms of the four Dharma seals. And what are the four Dharma seals? They are that all conditioned phenomenon are transient and always changing, right? We have no sustained permanent self. We are always changing. Everything is always changing. Second is that all conditioned phenomena experience stress and suffering due to the aggregates or our causes of stress and suffering, right? Which are those three poisons. All conditioned phenomena originate and exist codependently. So this is, all things are truly formless, empty, and pure, right? And all things arise as a result of causes and conditions. And things arise due to our karma or our action, which is our action of body, speech, and mind. And lastly, nirvana, the extinction of the aggregates or the causes of our suffering, is true tranquility. In other words, it is the opposite of stress and suffering. So seeing things in this way is how Buddha sees and experiences all things. A true Buddha is one who dwells in the state of true understanding of these Dharma seals, seeing things as they are. A true Buddha has cut off the roots of causes of stress and suffering. And so this is how Namo Amida Buddha sees and experiences all things. These three poisons, however, cause us to have the need to possess and have the fear of loss, both of which are not in alignment with true reality, which of course then causes us to experience our stress and suffering. And the three poisons, as was mentioned in this passage of Tanisho, is likened to us living in a burning house. So the three poisons, our passions in the sutras, are likened to fire or burning that Buddha is trying to help us escape. Because we only know how to rely on our own three poisons, we are constantly cultivating our three poisons. Thus, it is said that it is like we are always on fire. And with everyone doing this, it is like the whole world is on fire. Thus, it is said that it is like we are living in a burning house. To be hopelessly reliant on our three poisons means that we only know how to think of good and bad in our own terms and based on our own conveniences. We are constantly differentiating and discriminating everything and everyone that we encounter based on our own convenience. We rely on our own categories of differentiations. We rely on our own categories, our own differentiations, and our own discriminations that we create, trying to see life through what is convenient for myself, thus creating a delusional world for myself. So I would like to use the example of chocolate chip ice cream, mint chocolate chip ice cream, because I think it tastes good. So I like mint chocolate chip ice cream because I think that it tastes good. And I don't like Rocky Road because I particularly don't like marshmallows, especially in my ice cream. So because of this, I am likely to make the statement that mint chocolate chip ice cream is good and Rocky Road ice cream is bad. Someone who disagrees with me, however, might get unhappy when they hear me say this statement. The Rocky Road lover will say, no, you are so wrong. Rocky Road is the best and mint chocolate chip is not. And then I would argue back, no, you're wrong. Mint chocolate chip is the best and Rocky Road is not. And then I would be cycling through this suffering because of what I have determined as good and what the other person has determined as good, and what I have determined as bad and what the other person has determined as bad. Of course, mint chocolate chip is good, is true for me subjectively, and Rocky Road is good is subjectively true for the other person. But from the view of actual dharmic truth, both of these views are delusions. Mint chocolate chip ice cream just is. Rocky Road ice cream just is. But I am assigning this value to them based on my own contrivance and convenience, differentiating and discriminating and proceeding in life accordingly, in delusion. And we are doing this at all levels of our lives, not just something small like ice cream, but even in bigger worldviews. So this results in a false view of the world, and it creates pain and suffering for self and others. And further, we are so delusional and lost that we don't even realize that we're doing this. And so because we don't know we are doing this, we are so used to doing this, we think this is fine. I'm sure that many of you have seen this meme going around, and I always think of Jodo Shinshu when I see this meme. But Namo Amida Buddha can see that we aren't fine. And Namo Amida Buddha is so sad to see us suffering this way, and so vowed to get us out, working tirelessly to help us realize that we are trapped in the burning house and trying to help us get out of it. So what the Venerable One is teaching us here is that he wants others to understand that it is because we are so delusional and lost as individuals, we do not have the wisdom to discern what is actually helpful for us. We do not have the wisdom to discern what is good. We do not have the wisdom to discern what is bad. in terms of effectively moving toward closer to awakening. And because we are living amongst others who are in the same boat, we should not rely on our conventional worldviews or way of thinking or anything in this world. It is all false, and it will not lead us to sustain joy, and it will not ultimately help us to escape the burning house. In other words, it will not help us to completely, ultimately unbind ourselves from the roots of our stress and suffering. Only the Nembutsu, Namu Amida Buddha, is true and can be relied upon. I would now like to move on to a passage from Article 8, and which Venerable Shinran describes a relationship to Namu Amida Buddha. This passage reads, "From the side of the devotee, Nembutsu is not a practice and is not a good act. We say it is not a practice because it is not a practice one does out of one's own contrivance. We say it is not a good act because one does not cultivate good out of one's own contrivance. It is separate from self-effort and completely due to the efficacy of Amida Buddha. Thus, it is not a practice and it is not a good act from the side of the devotee." Again, when we read passages from Tanisho and Venerable Master Shinran's writings, we need to remember the traditional Buddhist context of some of these words. So practice in traditional Buddhist context is the cultivation of wholesome bodily action through speech and mind, body, speech, and mind. Wholesome action of body, speech, and mind that one consciously does to get closer to cutting off one's 3 poisons. And so, as we established also in the explanation of the epilogue, good means that which leads us to liberating ourselves from our roots of suffering. We also established in the explanation of the epilogue that Venerable Shinran sees himself and other unawakened ordinary beings as dwelling in the house of the 3 poisons. Because of this, there is absolutely nothing, no karma that we can do that is good, because all of our actions are based on a false premise, which is our 3 poisons. Our likes based on our own convenience, our dislikes based on our own convenience, and our delusion and confusion of true Dharma and reality. So Venerable Shinran in this section is explaining that since we are not cultivating any wholesome good acts when we recite Namo Amida Buddha, we as Jodo Shinshu devotees should not call this a practice. I think it is important to note that there are other schools and general Pure Land practices that do consider reciting Namo Amida Buddha as a practice that cultivates good virtue and merit that leads one towards liberation. And so it is also in this context that Venerable Master Shinran is clarifying that we as Jodo Shinshu devotees should not view the recitation of Namo Amida Buddha in this way. For Venerable Master Shinran, Namo Amida Buddha is the voice that is calling to us from the outside of this burning house to let us know that Namo Amida Buddha is the thing, the entity that will ultimately carry us out of the burning house. We only need to recognize it, accept it, and trust it and have confidence in it. Thus, our recitation of Buddha's name is us responding to Buddha. I hear you. I hear you. When we hear this calling or realize our escape route, we should not say that we established the escape route through our own cultivation or virtue, because Namo Amida Buddha has already established it. We are merely recipients of this escape route who are reacting to it and helping to pass the message on to others. So I would like to give the example in terms of our effication of recitation, the song Yesterday by the Beatles. According to Wikipedia, this song has been covered or sung by other people over 2,000 times. Over 2,000 cover versions have been made of this song, right? So all these other people are singing it, and we have heard it through the singing of the Beatles and also through the singing of these other people who look up to this Beatles song. So to me, this is just like Namo Amida Buddha calling its name and the other Buddhas praising the Buddha for this name. And we are able to hear the name through all the Buddhas praising the name and Namo Amida Buddha itself singing the song, or excuse me, saying its name, Namo Amida Buddha, right? So just like the Beatles, when we hear this song yesterday that I'm sure we're all familiar with, you know, whether we hear it from the Beatles themselves or from a cover band, when we sing it, it will never be a song that we created or can take credit for, right? We are merely singing this song as a response, as an expression of joy for this song. We had absolutely nothing to do with its creation or efficacy, and we have nothing to do with how or why the song is so popular or brings joy or feelings to other people, right? So Namo Amida Buddha to me is just like this. This is the same as the Nembutsu. We have absolutely nothing to do with its creation or efficacy. Thus, Venerable Shinran is saying that we should not consider the recitation of Nembutsu as a practice, nor should we consider it a cultivation of good. Both the practice of good and good, both the practice and the good act for our liberation were established outside of ourselves by Namo Amida Buddha. I would now like to move on to a passage from Article 5, which Venerable Master Shinran is sharing his understanding of his relationship to others. Yuenbo wrote Master Shinran's words, I, Shinran, have never said Nembutsu even once for the sake of filial piety towards my parents. The reason is that all sentient beings have been my siblings, father, and mother. Becoming Buddha in the next life that follows this, I will help each and every one of them. So we have established that according to Venerable Shinran, recitation of Nembutsu should not be considered a form of practice or act or good act of cultivating good, because we have no personal influence on its efficacy to liberate beings from their roots of suffering. The reason being is that we are beings with minds of the three poisons dwelling in this burning house. So as I mentioned, other schools and traditions considered recitation of Nembutsu as a form of practice and an act of cultivating good for the sake of oneself and others. Because of this understanding, other schools also considered reciting Nembutsu a form of merit or virtue transfer. One repeatedly says Nembutsu for the sake of helping someone else, especially loved ones who have passed away already. And this was to help them be born into a better condition in the next life. However, this is not how Venerable Shinran, as we see, understood the working of Namo Amida Buddha. Again, Venerable Shinran himself understood Namo Amida Buddha as coming from the outside of himself and coming from the outside of this burning house. And so there was no merit for him to say that he was transferring to others, even his parents. Thus, this is one part of the context through which Venerable Shinran makes the statement. The other part is Venerable Shinran's understanding of his relationship to other people. Venerable Shinran truly understood himself to have been transmigrating through suffering life after suffering life since the beginningless beginning with all other beings in this burning house. In his main text, the Mondui, he writes, however, all the ocean-like multitudinous beings since the beginningless past have been transmigrating in the sea of ignorance, drowning in the cycle of birth and death, bound to samsara. I would like to note, if you go to my handout with supplemental on defining terms, Shakyamuni Buddha also made a similar statement in one of his sutras, which I have recorded in there. So according to Master Shinran, we have all been wandering on, transmigrating life after life We have each been transmigrating from one form to another. Thus, we have all been intermingling and dependently originating amongst each other for millennia. How can we say that we do not have a relation to someone or not? And I understand that in our day and age today, it may be difficult for us to accept that we have been transmigrating, but have you ever heard the phrase, you are what you eat, right? We eat meat, fish, plants, drink water. So we have all of these beings inside of us. We are not apart from them. People who have died before us have been buried, decomposed in the ground, or ashes buried in the ground or scattered in the ocean, becoming part of nature again, feeding plants, bugs, and animals, etc., that we as a species will continue to eat. On top of this, today we know about DNA and RNA physical material from our parents and relatives that actually become part of us. So these are just examples of the tangible aspect that our human minds can conceive of. But there is much more the Buddha taught on the non-tangible side of life that our limited human minds cannot conceive of, but they're happening nonetheless. This is the difference between seeing life as just life or understanding life as immeasurable life. We tend to see life as beginning on our birth date and ending on our death date, limited to our physical life in this body. However, Namo Amida Buddha sees life in a much greater way than this, transcending our limited view of life temporally and physically. Namo Amida Buddha sees life as great and immeasurable. And it is through this wisdom from the Buddha that Venerable Shinran received that allowed him to make this statement. And because of this, I think we should be careful not to easily dismiss the idea that life is constant with no beginning and no end. It existed before we were all born, and it will continue to exist after us. As my friend Lauren reminds me, we are all individuals existing as part of the infinite. So with all of this in mind, in this passage, Master Shinran is clarifying that he does not recite Nembutsu for the sake of his parents because, one, his recitation of Nembutsu is not a form of merit transference and is not a form of practice. And two, because he recognizes his potential relationship to all beings and sees all beings that experience stress and suffering as dwelling together with him, equally needing to be rescued from this burning house in the past, present, and future. So finally, I would like to present a passage from Article 1, which to me represents the universalness of Namo Amida Buddha's vow. And this section reads, Amida Buddha established the fundamental vow to rescue all beings who are consumed by afflictions and have deep, heavy transgressions. Because this is the reason for the establishment of the vow, Amida Buddha did not set karmic conditions such as being young or old, or good or bad, in order to rely on the vow. Only Shinjin is necessary. Trusting that we are rescued through Amida's universal vow, and that our birth in the Pure Land is resolved, the heart and mind to say Nembutsu arises within us, and Amida Buddha grants us the spiritual benefit of being embraced and not abandoned. So to me, this passage encapsulates the essence of Jodo Shinshu. And I would like to talk about this passage in 3 points. First is, it is reiterating who we are. The second point is that only Shinjin is necessary. And what is Shinjin? This is the $10 million question that we're all asking all the time, right? True and real Shinjin is to truly hear the intent and calling of Namo Amida Buddha. And point number 3 I would like to cover is those who have heard the intent and calling of Namo Amida Buddha are embraced and never abandoned. So point 1, reiterating who we are. Venerable Master Shinran says that we are all consumed by afflictions and have deep, heavy transgressions, which means that we are all in the burning house and we have all been transmigrating. Consumed by afflictions means that our afflictions, our three poisons, control us and overwhelm us. We are overwhelmed by our fire that we are creating, thus continuously contributing to this burning house. Deep and heavy refers to the weight of transgressions due to how long they have built up. So I like to use the example of soap scum on a shower door to represent our deep and heavy transgressions. The longer that we use a shower and we don't take time to clean it, if we have a glass door, the soap scum will continually build up. And the thicker it becomes over time, the harder it is to clean off, no matter how hard we try. And I think that our transgressions are like this. As we have been transmigrating for millennia, as Venerable Shinran says, the soap scum is now virtually impossible to remove. We can certainly try, but the surface will barely be scratched. And I would like to again remind everyone that transgressions, is equal to bad acts. And in the context of Buddhism, this means acts that take us further away from liberating ourselves from our roots of suffering. So because we are living in this life of soap-scummed glass shower, we are living in this burning house, endlessly transmigrating. Namo Amida Buddha established the 18th vow and its supporting vows in order to rescue and ultimately liberate all of us from our root causes of suffering. Because Namo Amida Buddha deeply understands our condition of being totally reliant on our three poisons, there is no outward condition as a prerequisite for accepting and taking this escape route out of the burning house. Namo Amida Buddha is reaching out to all of us universally. It doesn't matter if one is young or old, good or bad. It doesn't matter what one's sexual orientation is, one's gender identity, one's ethnicity, one's spoken language, the condition of one's body or health. To Namo Amida Buddha, these are all superficial discriminations, delusions that we as beings with defiled minds are making up. And Amida Buddha, Namo Amida Buddha, is working to embrace and grasp all of us and not abandoning anybody. I would like to now move on to the second point. So none of those other discriminating things that we can create are, that's all false. Only Shinjin is necessary. So Venerable Shinran clarifies that in the 18th vow, Namo Amida Buddha says that only Shinjin is necessary. So what is Shinjin? It is to deeply, profoundly find truthful for oneself without a doubt that I am living in this burning house, transmigrating since a beginningless beginning, consumed by the burning of my three poisons, with no way out. But it is to simultaneously, deeply, profoundly find truthful for oneself without a doubt that Namo Amida Buddha established the universal vow to rescue a being such as myself in order to be carried to the realm of parinirvana, to forever sever my roots of suffering of the three poisons. Once these theories, these two, quote, theories, right, become experientially true for each of us as individuals, it is said that we have truly heard and encountered Namo Amida Buddha. And this is what Venerable Shinran describes as true and real Shinjin. The very instant true and real Shinjin becomes a part of us, the cause and condition for our future Buddhahood is established. Thus, the issue of our future transformation in the Pure Land is settled. We have experienced and accepted that we are in the burning house, and we experientially know that there is a foolproof escape route out of this burning house. This whole process encompasses what it means to truly hear the intent behind Namo Amida Buddha. To profoundly hear the intent behind Namo Amida Buddha is to accept and trust in Namo Amida Buddha. We must remember that Namo Amida Buddha is calling to us from the outside of the burning house, making itself known, letting us know that there is something greater, calmer, and safer than the world that we are experiencing. It calls out its own name, Namo Amida Buddha, Namo Amida Buddha. And when we hear the Buddha and its intent calling to us, making itself known to us, we want to let it know that we have heard it. So we call back, Namo Amida Buddha. So this call and response relationship, I think, is like the Marco Polo swimming pool game. In the game of Marco Polo, there is one person who is it, whose eyes are closed, and they are trying to tag the other people who are able to see, right? The one who cannot see tries to find the one that can. In the game, the person, in the game, the person who is it calls out Marco, and the others respond Polo. So the one who cannot see must follow the calling voice. And I know that this is a limited analogy because in Marco Polo, you don't want to get tagged, but for the purposes of explaining the call and response, I feel that Marco Polo, the game, is appropriate. So our relationship with Namo Amida Buddha, I think, is like this. Namo Amida Buddha knows that we are blind to true reality. We cannot see it. Even though it is right in front of us and all over around us, we cannot see it. Thus, Namo Amida Buddha makes itself known to us by calling out its own name, Namo Amida Buddha. But Namo Amida Buddha calling to us is only half of the equation. We also have to recognize its presence and respond to it. Again, we respond to it by sincerely reciting Namo Amida Buddha. I take refuge in Amida Buddha. And we accept, through this calling, we are accepting that I need help and I trust that I will be embraced and carried by the infinite as I am, as someone full of 3 poisons and living in this burning house. Oops, excuse me. I need to continue with my third point, which I apparently didn't make a slide for. The third point is to be embraced and not abandoned. So once we are connected with Namo Amida Buddha at this spiritual experiential level, nothing can break that bond. It is like an ultra strong magnet or gravitational field or tractor beam, if you like sci-fi. Being connected and embraced doesn't mean that we are transformed into the Dharma realm of Pure Land at that moment. Our minds and bodies are still full of the 3 poisons. As long as we reside in these bodies, we are still living in this burning house. However, we can feel or sense the wisdom and compassion of Namo Amida Buddha and the Pure Land constantly active and around us at all times in our lives, embracing us, not abandoning us. So I would like to use the example of our receiving the benefits of the sun. So we are not on the sun, right? The sun is millions of miles away from where we are. But every day we can feel and benefit from the light and heat of the sun, which is the sun's activity coming out to reach us. Similarly, just as we don't say that we are at the sun, feeling the sun's heat, we should not say that we are in the Pure Land. However, once we know that we are receiving Namo Amida Buddha's wisdom and compassion, and we know that we are within its embrace, then we should also be careful to not say that we are completely separate from it either. We are embraced by it, and our response and reactions are expressions of that. Once we become aware of this, we cannot unexperience this. Once we are embraced, we are embraced. and Namo Amida Buddha will never abandon us. So that is my conclusion of presenting the passages from Tanisho. But now I would like to invite us to quickly reflect and think on Shinran's words. So in the epilogue, we learned that Venerable Shinran understands us as beings who do not know what true good or true bad is. We create good and bad, differentiating and discriminating based on our own conveniences. We are constantly living in an everyday world full of delusion, pain, and suffering, and we are dwelling in a burning house. In Article 8, we are taught that Namo Amida Buddha is not an action that originates from inside of us, but that Namo Amida Buddha comes from the realm of Dharma reality trying to reach us. In Article 5, we are taught that Venerable Master Shinran saw all beings together and that saw that we have all been wandering on from life to life with no specific beginning point, suffering in this burning house. He understood that all lives have been intertwined closely to him at some point in existence. From this understanding, he saw everyone as people that universally needed rescuing from their suffering in the world of the burning house. And lastly, in Article 1, we are taught about the universalness of Namo Amida Buddha's vow, which is the essence of Jodo Shinshu. This is to deeply, profoundly find truthful for oneself, without a doubt, that one is living in this burning house, transmigrating since a beginningless beginning, without a way out, and to deeply, profoundly find truthful for oneself, without a doubt, that Namo Amida Buddha established the universal vows to rescue such beings in order to be carried to the realm of reality, to be embraced and not abandoned. So with that, I would like to offer some conclusory remarks, because some of you might be asking, well, what does this have to do with LGBTQ issues? So I would like to address that now in my conclusory remarks. So as we reflect on these words in Tanisho, I think it is important to note that nowhere in Shinran's words did he make the statement that all people are equal in the way that we conventionally might think that they are. Venerable Shinran's understanding of equality goes beyond our conventional understanding. He does not speak of equality, but he speaks of being all together with others in this world of the burning house, transmigrating with others for so long that they are like brothers, sisters, and parents. In this burning house, as beings with deluded minds of the three poisons, we cannot see, all of us cannot see the true essence of all the things as Namo Amida Buddha does. We create our own rules and our own worldviews based on our own conveniences and our own arbitrary definitions of equal and not equal, good and bad, virtuous and not virtuous, etc. We have minds that see in a dualistic mode, here and there, us and them, like, dislike, life, death, gay, straight, trans, cis. This mind is the cause of our suffering, and it is so deep that we don't even realize we are in it. And when we are made to realize it, we are too addicted to this world to even want to get out of it quickly. This is the wisdom that Venerable Shinran received about himself and his existence, which he attributes coming from the working of Namo Amida Buddha. Shakyamuni Buddha and the seven, he also attributes them to coming from Shakyamuni Buddha and the 7 great Buddhist masters. This is one aspect of the wisdom that he deeply wanted others to hear through his own experiential encounter with Namo Amida Buddha as well. Through the wisdom of Namo Amida Buddha, which comes from outside of himself, Venerable Shinran profoundly understood the nature of humans and our human world. So as our tradition of Jodo Shinshu has developed, this foundational worldview is illustrated in the setup of our temple hondo, or main hall, the hall is divided into two sections. The Onaijin, the inner sanctum, right, which houses the shrine of Namo Amida Buddha, and it is where the ministers chant the sutras. And it is also comprised of the Gejin, this outer sanctum, where the Sangha sits. The inner sanctum, the Onaijin, represents the Buddha's pure Dharma realm. And this outer sanctum, the Gejin, represents our defiled realm. We all sit together in the Gejin, and all are welcome to sit in the Gejin. So why is this called the Gejin, or the outer sanctum? Why outer? It is because we are all together living outside of reality in the realm of delusion. As we sit in the Gejin together, we all look towards the Buddha together. All of us in the Gejin are different. We are all unique, with unique life conditions. We are all in different stages of life. We are all at different levels of, quote, understanding Buddhism. But as we sit together, the same Buddha Dharma from the same source is being directed from the Onaijin, from Namo Amida Buddha, to each one of us in the Gejin. This ritual activity helps us to look towards the same light together with others, and that this light that works to embrace, envelop, and never abandon each of us. It helps us to recognize that everyone that we are sitting with are our fellow companions and fellow travelers whom we have been transmigrating with, at some point being related to each person. We are together in the Gejin with people of the past, people of today, and people of the future. I would like to make a quick side note about the Gejin, the traditional Gejin. So in America today, our Gejin has pews, right, or rows of benches or maybe chairs. And often there's an aisleway in the middle for people to line up to offer incense, which seemingly divides the room, right? Pre-COVID times, some temples might have required Dharma school students to sit with their teachers. Our Gejin is divided and people are categorized. However, in the traditional Gejin of local temples in Japan, it is just one giant room with no demarcation of where anyone should or needs to sit. Everyone is together, finding the spot that is most comfortable and appropriate for them. So I would like you to keep this image in your mind as I continue. So as I mentioned, the Gejin represents a world of pure, outside of pure true reality. From Buddha's perspective, Buddha sees us relying on and living in a world based on falseness and non-enduring things. When we only rely on what is in this world for truth and joy, we will constantly be driven only by our three poisons. We would be leaning into the chaos and defilement of this world, leaning into the burning house. Namo Amida Buddha is trying to get us to aspire to get out of this false, chaotic, and defiled world, to get out of this burning house. And only from the outside, as Buddha, can we truly help those inside to help calm the fire. I'm a Hamilton fan, and Thomas Jefferson in the play Hamilton has the line, "If there's a fire you're trying to douse, you can't put it out from inside the house." So by aspiring to leave, we no longer want to lean into our three poisons, and we accept Namo Amida Butsu as our foundation for going forward. And by relying on Namo Amida Buddha as the foundation for our lives, we accept two things. We profoundly accept that I am a being completely full of the three poisons, differentiating and discriminating everything I encounter, creating my defilements of good and bad based on my own personal conveniences. We also simultaneously accept that Namo Amida Buddha's universal vow was established because I am the way that I am, and I am the way that I am, and its light unconditionally embraces me and never abandons me, carrying me to complete non-suffering Buddhahood after this human form as I am. So as I am means that I am not required to first become Buddha or Bodhisattva or great sage in this life and body. We truly encounter and experience this for ourselves and feel embraced and not abandoned by Namo Amida Buddha for ourselves. The wish will naturally arise in us that Namo Amida Buddha be heard by all who wish to hear it. And we will do our best to make Venerable Shinran and Namo Amida Buddha's teaching available for others to hear, so that others who have not yet had the opportunity to do so can also hear the teaching for themselves. In this Jodo Shinshu tradition, this sincere sharing is considered an expression of our own joy for Buddha's teaching. So we can see from Tanisho and some other examples of Venerable Shinran's writings that he urged himself, or that Shinran himself urged everyone to recite Namo Amida Buddha to settle their own future Buddhahood. And once that was settled, Namo Amida Buddha became one's foundation in life. And then he urged people to continue to recite Namo Amida Buddha to help others meet with the universal vow for themselves. He sincerely wished for everyone to become Buddha together. This was Venerable Shinran's approach to helping and guiding others, in line with the Mahayana teaching of becoming Buddha for the benefit of self and others. In our societal context today, we might feel that this view or approach is weak or maybe not active enough in our effort to help others. But I think it is important to note that Venerable Shinran was someone who lived during a time of famine, pandemic, and natural disasters. He was separated from his family when he was taken to the monastery of Mount Hiei. He experienced self-doubt. He was exiled from his community for his Buddhist practice, being separated from his friends and teacher. And some of his fellow Dharma travelers were even executed. And he had spiritually disowned his own son. In other words, Venerable Shinran was not a stranger to adversity in his own life and did not take his Buddhahood lightly. In his writings, we have no evidence that Venerable Shinran, through all his struggles, ever advocated, quote, fighting back or protesting against anything in the way that we might think today. Rather, the written evidence that we do have, which we base our tradition's doctrine on, urges all of us to turn to Namo Amida Buddha. Today, we can listen to Venerable Shinran's urging. Once each of us are settled for ourselves with Namo Amida Buddha, we should try to make sure others can encounter Buddha's universal vow, not only through various activities in our everyday lives, but also within our temples and sanghas. We should do what we can to create an environment that allows all to listen to Namo Amida Buddha, regardless of their unique conditions, if they are LGBTQ identifying or not LGBTQ plus identifying, if they are completely new to the teaching, or a family member or relative of one of the founding families of the temple. We should do all that we can so that everyone can hear this precious and rare teaching. Now I'm going to assume that each of us who have gathered here today have felt moved in some way to support the LGBTQ plus community in some form or another. At an everyday societal level, as everyday people, to describe the support and societal treatment of certain people and groups, we tend to use the phrases human rights, civil rights, or equal rights. But I think we should seriously reflect on what the word rights means. Rights, as I see it being used today, we tend to use it as a synonym for maybe entitlements or givens, right? I have the right to life. I am entitled to live. This is a given. I completely understand the need for this understanding and this saying at a governmental and societal level. I'm not disputing that at all. However, I think that we should be aware that this is the complete opposite of what Shakyamuni Buddha taught. First, in the Three Treasures, we read, Hard is it to be born into human life. Now we are living it. Shakyamuni Buddha taught that the birth as a human is not guaranteed. Secondly, Shakyamuni Buddha taught that after one is born into this human world, one will inevitably, inescapably experience stress and suffering, especially through sickness, aging, and death. He taught that everything conditioned, including our lives, is always changing, and that we do not know when the conditions for our lives will change or end. So I think it is important for us to understand that from a Buddhist perspective, life is not an entitlement or a given. It is an experience that we are privileged to live while conditions support it. Further, when we engage in movements that support human rights or civil rights or equal rights, these movements have also, I noticed, tend to become known as the fight for these things, right? The fight for human rights, the fight for civil rights, the fight for equal rights. It becomes a fight when we think others do not support the movements that I am aligned with. The people who do not agree with me become others, and I no longer view them as together with me. They become against me. And this results in me digging my heels in the sand, thinking that my side is right and others are wrong. And people in both parties end up feeling this way. Venerable Shinran's words to me become all the more true that we are beings completely full of the three poisons of like based on my own convenience, dislike based on my own convenience, and delusion to reality. We become ever more consumed by the fire of the burning house. Shakyamuni Buddha and Venerable Shinran, of course, both acknowledge that there are people who face extreme hardships in life. And they both lived in a time where the governing system was one of rulers and caste or class systems. But I think, again, it is very important to note that based on the stories that we have received about both of these individuals, there is no evidence that either of them supported or advocated fighting back against the oppressors, as we might colloquially say today. As Jodo Shinshu devotees, when we engage in activities that support socially marginalized people, such as the LGBTQ plus community, I think we have to be careful from a doctrinal perspective to not castigate or other anyone who does not support LGBTQ plus issues. Because if we are not careful in our effort to embrace one group, we may also inadvertently push away others. So if we choose to engage in activities that support the LGBTQ plus community, and if we choose to do so as a Jodo Shinshu devotee, I think we need to take care to do so with Namo Amida Buddha's universal vow in our hearts, helping ourselves and everyone to see us as all being together. I think we also need to keep in mind that the name of our main temple of our tradition is Honganji, the temple of the fundamental vow. The fundamental vow, it is what, as I mentioned, is the crux of our teaching. We are not called the temple of human rights, or the temple of civil rights, or the temple of equal rights. I think Jodo Shinshu and the universal vow of Namo Amida Buddha is trying to help us transcend or go beyond what these rights movements are trying to accomplish. So the universal vow of Namo Amida Buddha is truly trying to help each of us understand the root essence of not just our individual existence, but of our shared existence. Through this root essence that we all share and have in common, which is that our existence is transient, that we are all conditioned and codependently arising and existing. We are all experiencing stress and suffering due to our three poisons. And this is leading all of us to want to live happy lives based on each of our own conveniences, and the desire for each of us to be seen and accepted for who each of us truly are as individuals. And we can begin through this understanding, we can begin to wholly understand and accept the true nature of ourselves. And when we can begin to realize how we have forever been entwined since the beginningless past, and that we are all fellow travelers and companions in this journey that we are calling life, as Venerable Shinran taught, that we are being led to wholly sympathize with and understand the nature of others. Sorry, I got so into my presentation that I forgot the slides. So even Shakyamuni Buddha taught that we are all together. In the three treasures, we recite, I take refuge in Buddha, may we all together, da 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 da, right? I take refuge in Dharma, may we all together, da 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 da. I take refuge in Sangha, may we all together, da 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 da. So as we sit in this Gejin of life together, I know that we will not always get along. We will continue to categorize others, judge others, differentiate others, and discriminate others based on our own individual judgments and selfish beneficial conveniences and inconveniences, not just in the outside world, but even within our own temples. But as we receive the wisdom to recognize this in ourselves, the wisdom to recognize that we are all together in this world of transiency that is like a burning house, as Venerable Shinran did, I hope that somewhere in our hearts we will want to escape the burning house and help others escape it as well through attainment of parinirvana or birth in the Pure Land, becoming part of the working of the Buddha Dharma that guides all of us. As Jodo Shinshu devotees, again, I think it is most important that while we live in this world, we keep Venerable Shinran's words and universalness of Namo Amida Buddha central in our hearts as we live our lives and engage in our own societal and temple activities. I noticed that recently our temple communities are often gung-ho to go outside to support the LGBTQ plus community. But I would like to ask, are we doing what needs to be done inside our temples to support those who are part of the LGBTQ plus community, especially those who might not be out yet? We should be careful to assume that everyone that sits in our literal Gejin with us is comfortable being there as they are, present enough to hear the teaching of the Buddha Dharma. I think we often want to fix what is outside of ourselves before we look inward. However, Venerable Shinran and Namo Amida Buddha is urging each of us to settle ourselves first, solidifying our own spiritual foundations, and then we can joyfully share Namo Amida Buddha with others. I think this includes being honest about the nature of our individual sanghas as well as our individual selves. So to create an environment for all to listen to Namo Amida Buddha means to create an environment for all to listen to Namo Amida Buddha. It is said that during the time of Honen Shonin, people from all strata of society, all walks of life, sat together to listen to the teaching of Namo Amida Buddha. I hope that our temples can be places of refuge for all who wish to listen to Namo Amida Buddha. The light of wisdom and great compassion is constantly working to guide each of us indiscriminately, non-judgmentally, and universally. It is a light that works to guide all beings without exception. As we move forward together in the Gejin of immeasurable life, let's all keep Venerable Shinran's and Namo Amida Buddha's aspiration for all of us to hear the true Buddha Dharma alive by keeping this wish central in our hearts, doing what we can for Namo Amida Buddha to be heard inside and outside of the temples, wishing for everyone to have the opportunity to joyfully experience life and joyfully experience the feeling that Namo Amida Buddha embraces each one of us and never abandons anyone. So thank you very much, everybody, for being here and listening to what I realize now is a long-winded presentation, but thank you very much for being here and studying and reflecting on Tanisho and our embrace of everybody, including the LGBTQ community. Thank you very much.